not
all right.
bad. All right, it is
We're
connecting.
now live. Yeah, it's saying streaming live now here.
Well, it's still setting it up. Just, all right, there we are. I think we are live. Yeah, all right. So welcome, Martha.
Thank you very much, Becky. It's
And
lovely to be here.
yeah, I'm experimenting with having someone join me on my live today. So
Thank you for letting me be the guinea pig. I really appreciate it.
hopefully technology works for us.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? There you are over the States, and here am I halfway up a mountain in Ireland, and we're
I know.
communicating seamlessly. You know?
Those pictures of where you are in Ireland right now are just amazing. They're just gorgeous.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to come on here today. Trying to see if I can record. I think it's already doing that. All right. So I wanted to come on here today just to talk about how, because we're both empty nesters, and just to talk a little bit about how life changed for us after.
Yeah. So when did you first become an empty nester, and how, like, what first changed for you, and how prepared were you for it?
Yeah, prepared, not at all. I have two kids. So when both of my kids left at age 16 to finish high school at a boarding school. So they both left home early. But there was about 4 years in between the two of them. So when my daughter left at 16, I was like, oh, wait, there's not much time left for my other one. And I really hit this, oh my gosh, what now? And that's when I realized I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. I had been teaching yoga classes and sometimes 15 classes a week, and that's exhausting. It's just on my body. It was exhausting. I couldn't keep doing it. I knew that. So I spent at least a year trying to figure out what I was going to do. I always describe it as having like this door open or a window open in my head going, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And I just let it be like that for a long time. And one day it was like, okay, you're going to do yoga therapy. I was like, great. What's that?
Well, tell us, what is that? A lot of people don't know.
Well, there's a lot. You're right. There's a lot of differences in the yoga therapists out there. Some of them are more like a physical therapist. You go in and you say, I have a sprained ankle. Help me walk and fix this and make this better. And they can help you. Or maybe that's just one example, but it could be scoliosis or something. How can I deal with this in my life? That's one end of the spectrum. I work on the completely opposite end of the spectrum of it's more emotional and mental connection to your body. So all of the traumas that we live through, like the current one we're all going through with a pandemic,
massively,
they get stored in your body. All of the experiences you've gone through, they get stored in your body. And if they've not been processed, sometimes they start to cause issues. So I describe it as if you have like an ache and you go to the doctor and your doctor says, you're fine, nothing's wrong with you. And you're like, yeah, but it still hurts. Often that's an emotion or a trauma that's just gotten stuck in the body and needs to be dealt with. So if you don't answer that call, it's just going to get louder and louder and louder until you're like debilitated. You can't function in one way or another. So I help people to get to the root causes of issues and that are showing up in their body or in their life in some way, because what's happening in your body happening in your life. There's a direct connection. So we deal with that direct connection so that you can, enjoy life again.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you then go into, because I understand you now do coaching as well and therapy coaching. So how did you then move? Did you then move from yoga into doing that then also? I'm curious to know what the journey was like for you there.
Yeah, the therapy that I do involves a lot of different ways of working with people, whether it's one-on-one or in groups. And I've taken the trainings that I've done and applied them to women going through major life transitions, going from that full-time mom to being an empty nester, because, oh my gosh, what a shift. What a shift. I wasn't prepared. I remember that day when I was like, oh my gosh, I'm that mom who got lost. In the whole process of raising kids. So I distinctly remember that moment.
And I mean, would you find that maybe so many moms are still lost that it's not really a part of kind of like a rite of passage that's acknowledged in society?
Definitely.
Because our society is still so focused on, just get on with it, just move on. And I mean, it's huge. It's massive.
I think it's as big of a transition as when you become a mom. And think of all of the books out there, all of the support groups for new moms.
Yeah.
And that are out there to help you make that transition. But there's not a lot out there for helping you transition the other way. It's like, oh, kids are gone, bye. You know? I have talked to moms who 5-10 years after their kids have left, and they're still like, I don't know what to do with myself.
You were telling me that. I find that very, very sad, isn't it?
Find it's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, we develop so many skills as a mom. You know, we learn so much as a mom, and then just to have it all taken away all of a sudden because your kids, you raised them to be independent and they left. Great job, but you worked yourself out of a job, right?
Yeah,
so,
which you're supposed to do.
You're supposed to do that, but you have all of these skills, you have all of this knowledge, you have so much left to give that I find moms are like, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And I don't know what to do, I think comes from losing yourself in that whole being a mom.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you know, your kids were the same age as mine when she left, because my circumstance, as you probably know, is slightly different. I was living in Wales. I was married to a widower with 3 kids, and they were kind of like reared and gone. And then my own daughter was 16, and then we actually moved back to Ireland, and she went to live with her dad and stepmom. And that hadn't been part of the plan. I mean, if I had known I was going to lose my daughter as a result of divorce, I don't know I would have been able to go through with it. I really don't. So it was a bit like that, you know, for because 16 is young, like 18, 19, you've had the extra couple of years of like teaching them to be how an adult and maybe negotiating the boundaries, which, as we all know, with teenagers change every 30 seconds anyway. But 16 is really young. It's kind of like 2 to 3 years younger than most people. I mean, I know I went to Cork and I got a job in a guest house and I started studying feng shui and counseling. But I mean, I cried myself to sleep for 6 months because like nobody needed me. It was like, okay, I don't have to go and get somebody up in the morning, or I don't have to help them with I mean, at 16, they do know how to do their breakfast and stuff. But you know yourself, it's just very often all they want is you to be in the room with them, you know? Or gentle question, is the homework done? Or, you know, at that age, you're still bringing them here, there, and everywhere. You're bringing them to gym, you're bringing them to dance, you're bringing them to swimming, and then as they get that bit older, you're then collecting them from the nightclubs. And that's kind of like when it gets really hard, because like suddenly, you know, you can't even have a glass of wine after you've been working all day because you have to like go and collect them again at 11 o'clock at night. But it is, as you said, it's just like there's no preparation for it.
No, it's all of us. It's like an all of a sudden rip the Band-Aid off. If in the U.S., a lot of the times it's taking your kids to college that first time.
Right.
You drop them off and you walk away, and you're like, oh, now what? So yeah, it is like ripping off a Band-Aid.
Yeah. I mean, I remember somebody asking me 6 months later. I was doing a sailing course in Glenans, I think, in West Cork. And somebody, I mean, I was 47 at the time. And somebody asked me, what do I really want to do with my life? And I looked at her and went like, I don't know. And then like 2 minutes later said, I want to sail around the world. So I haven't sailed around the world yet, but anyway.
But I loved hearing.
So at least, you know, like, you know, you had the yoga to, you know, to then maybe draw from. And I had been studying counseling and I had been studying feng shui, and that's where the road I thought I was going to go on. And then I think there was 2 weekends in a row when the 2 courses clashed and I had to pick one or the other. So I picked the counseling. And then the astrology, as you know, was kind of like a long organic story. But it's, you know, it's back to like you're kind of like just left on your own. Like there's no support group. There's no support groups for empty nesters. It's not like, you know, when your 2-year-old is having tantrums, you can join the local toddler group, or you can ring a friend who might have a child the same age, or somebody somewhere can help you. And with this, there's like nothing.
Yeah, and then it coincides so often with menopause.
Yes,
that, you know, it's like a double whammy that's going on.
Yeah, which makes it, yeah. And then, you know, and again, I think the conventional thinking is still that menopause lasts 3 to 5 years. Like mine lasted 10. You know, it's like, all right, okay, so there's that as well. Thanks. And you see, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, people kind of thought, well, if you lived till you were 60 or 70, you'd had what we call in Ireland a good innings. You know, whereas now people do live until well into their 80s and even their early 90s. So like, you know, if somebody's only like 45 or 50 and suddenly their kids are gone, they are actually looking at another 30 years of life. They're looking at least another third. So it's wonderful that you're doing this work, because like, you know, as we've said in the pod that we're in, like a lot of my clients are like in that age group as well. It's like, you know, the kids are gone and the book they always wanted to write is there, and suddenly like there's no excuses anymore.
Yeah, so Martha, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do. I know it's astrocartography, but I don't know a lot about that.
Astrology, and I do astrocartography, and I kind of like a long organic road to that, because, you know, I lost my job in the recession in Ireland, and then I tried to become a photographer, and then I went to Italy to build that, and I had started studying astrology, and then just local people were asking me, would I do their charts? You know, would I do, like, you know, I had a lot of American and Australian friends who had visitors coming to visit them in Italy. And I just started, never looked back. So like astrology is like, it's the placement of the planets in your natal birth chart. It's like your astrological DNA, and it tells you kind of like what your, you know, what your makeup is, and like what your values are and what's important to you. Like, you know, the sun is the essence of you and how you shine. The moon is like your emotions. Mars is how you do things. Mercury is how you communicate. You know, it's quite complex. Like there's 12 planets, and there's 12 houses, then there's the lunar nodes. And it's like how the planets talk to each other is what puts everything together. So astrocartography is a very specialized branch of that. Astrocartography takes the planets in your natal birth chart and maps them all over the world.
Wow.
And you see if a planet is, you know, and it's aspecting the planets on what we call the 4 axes, which is like the ascendant and the descendant and the midheaven, and then the IC. And the midheaven is like the highest point of aspiration in your chart. So I became an astrologer when Chiron and Ceres were on my midheaven in Italy, because those planets changed. And Chiron is linked to, like, you know, healing wounds in yourself. And then when you heal those wounds, you heal others. And Ceres is all about the feminine, nurturing energy around land and family. And astrocartography, like, you know, if you move kind of like east or west, the planets will change more. If you move kind of south and north, depending on latitude and longitude, the planets may or may not change. But it's a mind-blowing aspect of astrology. And unfortunately, you know, the internet has dumbed down astrology a lot in the last few years. And astrocartography is actually seeing an increase in interest. But again, a lot of what you will see is articles written by people who've never actually relocated themselves. And I have relocated, you know, 5 or 6 times now in the last 4 years. So even though, as you probably know, I didn't want to go back to Ireland, I knew I had to after my mum died. And I used astrocartography to eventually find the most supportive place in Ireland to live. So sometimes, you know, people might have, their natal chart may not be that supportive, or, you know, because astrology, it's basically the studying of the planets and the houses across time and space. That's actually all it is, because the planets are always moving. So the planets are always moving in your chart, and that's what's called a transit chart. So like the natal chart is kind of like your astrological birth chart. It's kind of like the basis of everything. And then there's anything up to 12 different charts on top of that. So, you know, what I tend to do is, like, the first consultation is like to get somebody to understand their natal chart properly. And that can take, you know, I mean, I've been having my own chart done for 10 years and I'm still learning about myself. And then the transit chart is where the planets are now and what they're triggering in your chart. Like, for example, I have Pluto quincunxing my moon this year and next year. So Pluto is all about deep personal transformation and deep empowerment. And then the moon is all about home. And the quincunx is about adjustment. So obviously you've all publicly seen how I've had to adjust my home. I went from the East Coast to the West Coast. I went from California to Oregon, Oregon to Dublin, and out to Kenmare. That was my transit living out, you know?
Yeah.
And as an astrologer, Eric Meyer said to me last year, he said, like, the planets know where they're going, which I think is wonderful. Like, very often somebody will come to me for an astrocartography session because they'll want to relocate, maybe where they'll get maybe a better job or where they'll earn more money. But very often the underlying reason is actually they want to be more creative, or they want to be living more in line with their value system. And that's where you have to understand the natal chart and the transit chart before you do the astrocartography. I mean, I could move to like Scandinavia tomorrow, but my transit chart is still playing out. My natal chart is still playing out. So it is quite complex. And it's interesting that, you know, when I first became an empty nester, I wanted to do counseling and or feng shui. And then I ended up having to drop the feng shui, even though I'd already studied to an advanced level. So that was quite frustrating. But the counseling then really served me when I became an astrologer, because I had a strong grounding in ethics. I had a strong grounding in confidentiality. I knew how to get a Facebook page up. I knew how to get terms and conditions up. And you know yourself, it's like, you know, the admin part of your business, particularly for women, it can actually slow down your growth much more than you realize. Because, I mean, I'm not sure if this has been your experience or even your experience with your clients. So many women still think they have to do it all themselves. You know, I'll do the cooking, cleaning, shopping, washing, ironing, rear the kids, do all the school runs, and then I'll build my business on the side. It's like, okay, and how exactly are you going to do that?
Well, yeah, as a mom, that's what we do, right? Oh, I can volunteer for that. I can bring in the cookies for this party. I can, you know, organize the school trip. I can do it all.
Yeah.
And then we're collapsing in bed at night wondering, why are we so tired?
Yeah. I mean, as you know from our pod last week, I mean, I've hired somebody to help me with my admin. I have somebody else helping me with my blogs and my social media, and then somebody else with my bookkeeping. And like, I don't know myself. Like, I already have an accountant, but I needed somebody to do the day-to-day niggly things. And I mean, I got 2 clients the next day. So it's like, I had given all the stuff that I'm really not good at and that I shouldn't even be looking at in the first place to someone else. And then that frees me to like just do astrology and write.
Yeah, what you're describing is something that I love to help people do, is to figure out who they are, right? That's the program I've got starting on Saturday. Who am I now?
Tell me more about it, because you were talking a bit about it and I'd love to know more about it.
Well, it relates to what you're talking about. Who am I in this moment? What am I good at? What do I want to pursue? What excites me? How do I thrive right now? And those are all things you can only do if you know who you are, whether it's through exploring your natal chart or it's through listening to the wisdom from your body or what. The more you know who you are in this moment, the more you can align your life.
Absolutely. And how did you get to that stage of finding who you are? Like, was there any particular defining moment? Because I know we tend to think that maybe it's just like one course with one business coach or one light bulb moment, but very often it's a series of small events, or it's a series of coaching with a number of different people, as you and I both know, having been mentored by a lot of people in the last couple of months. So what would you have said was like the defining moment towards you realizing, like, who am I now?
Well, it changes. As you just said, it changes. And for me, it's been a process of just realigning. And I was talking with another friend about this a week or so ago. You align to who you are right now, and then something shifts in life. You lose a job, or you have to move, or something, and you have to realign again. So in my program, what I do is I take these moms through these different skill sets that they can learn, and they can reapply them over and over and over, because nothing's going, change is a constant. Nothing is going to stay the same forever. So as soon as something shifts in your life, you're going to have to adjust to that shift. How do you make that with grace? How do you make it with ease? How do you make it work for you? That's what I'm teaching my moms, is how to get to know yourself in this moment. What's your truth right now? And how do you take that truth and bring it into your life? So your truth is no longer, if your kids are either about to leave or have left, your truth is no longer, I have a kindergartner who I have to make sure eats and does their homework every day. Your truth has totally shifted from that. So who are you in this moment?
I mean, I've had, a handful of clients over the years who are women, maybe in their 60s, and they're still in a job they hate, or maybe they didn't get, very well looked after in their divorce, and they might be living in a rented house, or they own their house, but it's not worth selling and moving somewhere else. And I mean, God bless them. It's very poignant, because they, they're looking at their lives and going like, how did this happen? Excuse me, how did this happen? As in, how did I let this happen? And it's just, it can sometimes be a series of events, whereas, I see this with astrology, because, people can have either fixed or mutable or cardinal charts. Now, this is kind of quite a bit of a generalization, but like the energy of a mutable chart is somebody who's flexible and adaptable. the energy of a fixed chart is kind of like it's internal and it's still, and it's like, well, I'll decide in my time and you can all wait for me. And then the energy of cardinal planets would be like, you know, well, I'll start and I'll get going and never mind how it gets finished. And, you know, I see time and time again that people who might have, you know, more than half their chart in fixed signs, that they're the people that have had the greatest difficulty to adjust to life's changes, because they're so used to, well, like, it's been this way and I'll take my time, I'll do this. And when that's finished, then I'll do that. And when that's finished, then I'll do that. Where somebody who's cardinal, very cardinal, might be like, well, I'll start like 10 projects and I'll be running around after all of them, and then none of them will get finished. And I'm mutable, so I'm kind of like in the middle. But it's been very, very poignant to see that, because, you know, we all, astrologically, we all have major transits we go through. The Saturn return, which you may have heard of, is between the age of 28 to 30, because Saturn, all the planets take a certain number of years to come back to their natal place in your chart, because, as I said, the planets are always moving. So Saturn takes 28 to 30 years to go back to where it was in your chart when you were born. So that's why the Saturn return between the age of 28 to 30, Saturn embodies like routine and discipline and structure. And that's why, kind of in astrological terms, that's really when you become an adult. I mean, we all know people who are 24, they haven't a clue what they want to do with their life. And it doesn't really matter, because they're only 24. Or you're 27 and you're just like 3 years in your job, or you might be going out with somebody a couple of years, it's not working great, but it doesn't really matter because you're young. And then good old Saturn comes along between the age of 28 to 30 and says, like, okay, grow up now. So it's where you take on real world responsibilities. And it's why so many people at that age, you know, they either get married or they buy a house or they have kids. I mean, you know, traditionally, I mean, again, like IVF and women being fertile longer now has changed this. But like when I had Ruth, like 30 was the optimum time to have a kid. It was like, well, if you haven't started having them by 30, like, you know, look out, it's going to be difficult. That's not the case now. And astrology hasn't kept up with, you know, how much technology and science have changed in that way. But the next big return you have then is like, it's called the Uranus opposition. Uranus then will come to oppose its natal place in your chart between 38 and 42. And that's kind of like where you're looking at yourself in the mirror. And it really is. And again, can you see how it links with the midlife crisis? Like, okay, I've come this far and I have roughly another 40 years left. And it's like, okay. And it's where you're really triggered to become your authentic self. It's like the Saturn return is like you grow up, you take on real world responsibilities, you follow a specific path. And if your path isn't authentic, then during the Uranus, the opposition, that's very often when people like will lose a job or the marriage will break up. It's because like Uranus is forcing them down an authentic path. And then you have the Chiron return at the age of 50, which is when kind of like, you know, we complete any healing there may be in our lives, or where very often women will become very interested in alternative therapies. I see that time and time and time again. And then we have the second Saturn return between 58 to 60. And then we have the Uranus return at 84, and then the third Saturn return at 90. So all the later in life cycles are actually a lot more important than they were 30 years ago, because as I said, we are living longer. But astrologers haven't kept up with that, because a lot of, like, you know, the most well-known astrologers are actually younger than me. So haven't actually lived through the Uranus, and they may have lived through the Uranus opposition, but they mightn't have yet done the Chiron return or the Saturn return. So like my second Saturn return last year was like, you know, restructuring my life all over again. Okay, I'm kind of established now as an astrologer. What's next? And like the what's next for me was creativity, was to go back to doing more writing while still doing astrology. So can you see how like these life cycles all tie in with major life times in our life and life events anyway? And you know, in the States, people are just much more open towards astrology and to what it can teach you, because it's a combination of like knowing yourself and understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and kind of going, well, actually, I can change my life much more than I realized. You know, and I think, I mean, because I don't know if anybody's done any research as to whether do empty nesters who worked either part-time or full-time have an easier time of it than empty nesters who were at home for 20 years.
You know, I've not seen any research on that. And I'm finding that everyone has their own adjustment, whether, you know, and a lot of women who've been in jobs have been in them because they were convenient around their kids' schedule.
Yes, yes.
Or it provided security in some way, like insurance here in the US.
Yes, that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Or there are a lot of things that women have sacrificed in a
Yes.
job just so that they can do, have greater security with their child. So yeah, that's a huge shift.
It's
right
massive,
there,
actually. Yeah. And we don't talk about it.
Mm-mm.
And then maybe a lot of those women don't then go to develop their full potential, because maybe, maybe if they'd had a different mindset, or if they'd met somebody along the way, or if they'd bumped into a business coach, they might have said, well, okay, at least I'll train to do something else while I'm doing the safe job. I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, I know I did that, because when my daughter was young, I was a single parent for a couple of years, and I moved from, I can't remember what I was doing. I was in a job that involved a lot of travel, and then I consciously went into corporate sales in hotels, because that was as close as I could get Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Because yourself, the tourism industry is notoriously 24/7. And as a single parent, I couldn't do that. And at the time, there were no other single parents that were sales managers in Ireland in hotels. None.
Yeah. So, and then that's exactly what I did, was work around my kids' schedule, because I taught all those classes while they were in school. Or on the weekend when my husband could take over, or on days when I knew they didn't have school events or soccer or whatever it was.
Right.
I completely scheduled everything, my work schedule, around them. So having that freedom to develop it, it's taken me years to get out of the mindset of I have to work every weekend because that's the only time I can work. I'm like, oh, I can have a weekend off. Oh, that's so nice. It's amazing how you get stuck in this mindset, though. This is the pattern I've known for 20 years. How do I break out of that pattern?
That's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, from so many moms have more than one kid, so sometimes it's it's longer than 20. But 18, 19, you've been in that pattern for a while.
And even now that so many kids, I'm not sure if it's the same in the States, but like a lot of kids, like they leave home and then they come back because of the housing crisis. And that's another category that like nobody's looking at. That's some ways it's better, some ways it's worse, because you're not an empty nester, but they're not independent, but they're still treating you as if you're mom, and they might be working and earning a living, and you're going like, come on now.
Right. Yeah, I call those the kids that bounce back for one reason or another. I mean, mine bounced back early this year. He came home early from school because of COVID. I'm like, oh, hey, it's March and you're home. Okay. What are we doing with you for the next 2 months? And so, there's this constant shifting going on, because you're right. You're still not mom like you were when they were younger, but you're also not completely free, because oh wait, they're living in the house. But I mean, while my son was home, he wanted to cook his own meals frequently. Okay, great, have at it. I didn't have to worry about it. It was beautiful.
Okay. Right. Okay.
He had been away from home for years already, just coming home for holidays, that he wanted to be independent. I'm like, this is great, love it, love seeing how you've changed. But still, there's that whatever it is, when you're a mom, your child comes home, you are immediately catapulted back into
it's just this default, just this big soft spot in the middle of all of your body that just like never goes away.
That's right. You are mom again, no matter what, no matter whether they're 15, 20, or 30. So there's a lot with those kids bouncing back and forth, whether it's because of housing or COVID or job loss, whatever it is. It's a constant shift. So going back to, who am I now? Because they have just come back home. How do I be in this moment?
Yeah.
So those skills that you learn are just, I use them myself over and over again. What is my truth now? I actually did that.
I think if there's one thing we could tell the viewers to take away from that, like, it's like, who am I now and what's my truth now? And that it may not even be your truth next week, never mind next year.
There are some truths. I tell people there are some truths that probably stick with you for life. If you like chocolate as a kid, you probably still like it as a 58-year-old, right? But there are a lot of truths that just don't stick with you. Your house doesn't fit you anymore. You need more room. You need less room. You need a dog. You don't want a dog.
Yeah, yeah. And we're
Job I
conditioned to
hate.
think that those things can't change, or particularly in Ireland, because Ireland is ruled by Tories. Ireland is a very civil servant country. I know the Americans think it's a very spiritual country, and it is, but it's also very conservative as well. It's kind of like this really, very, very different country to the country it was even 10 years ago. But it's still like very not so much very Catholic, but very conservative, very security driven, very like, get the safe job, buy the one house, stay married to the same person, the kids go to the same school. That's still quite, quite a strong aspect in Ireland. And I mean, having lived in a couple of smaller towns in West Cork and now in Kerry, I mean, I can't help noticing very often the innovative people are people that come from other countries, that, set up stores or set up new business ideas or do new things that Irish people haven't thought of. And that's great. I mean, that's really to be welcomed, you know. And then it's as I said, like empty nesters, because the Irish mammy is kind of like such a stereotype. The Irish mammy is always there, like looking after the kids, and the Irish mammy is always expected to be the Irish mammy, to always be there, and like it's not really like that anymore, and yet it kind of still is, and we don't talk about it.
Yeah,
we don't talk about it.
Those hidden secrets that it's really still like that, but
yeah, and it's like it's like I was just upstairs before our session, and as you know, I'm in a 3-bedroom house, and I've cleared out the bed in the middle room to create like an artist studio. And it's the first time I've ever done that. Like, that's a huge thing for me. And I mean, I've wanted that for like 10 years. And I've had like spare rooms in other houses that I lived in on my own, but they ended up being like where I would do paperwork as well. So this is the first time that the desk I'm sitting at here now, I'm going to keep doing my astrology consultations here and all the admin work. But like the creative stuff is upstairs in that room. And it's only going to have like pretty beautiful things in it. I took a photograph earlier and I'm going to post it on Facebook later. And it's only going to be for writing and painting and for nothing else. And it was very much, well, like, this actually is now who I am.
Yeah. So I always bring everything back to your body. How does that, I'm watching you smile as you talk about this.
Yeah.
How does that feel in your body to have that creative
space?
It
feels extraordinary because like I'm doing an online painting course that starts in 2 weeks time, and I've wanted to paint for years, and my own astrologer predicted it years ago, but I kind of went, oh, I'm a photographer, then I'm a writer, then I'm an astrologer, maybe I can't do painting as well. And the reality is I can. Like, I was a photographer for like 8 years. That's a really solid length of time. That's a credible length of time. I've a body of work that goes back 10 years. I have astrology clients that go back 5 years. Like, that's not being fluffy or woolly or just starting something new as an empty nester because you don't know what to do. Because photography led to astrology led back to writing, which is now leading to painting. But like, since I signed up for this course, the way Facebook identifies what you've done and then you get loads of posts. I've had like 3 sponsored posts pop up for other Irish people that are doing like painting courses. But this woman, it's brilliant. It's a 4-week course. It's on Zoom. And this is absolutely amazing. I mean, the marketing is just like so spot on. It's like she sends you your paints and your palette brush and your brush and your canvas.
Nice.
Because that's one of the things that used to put me off painting, apart from the fact that I don't know how to paint and like, who's going to teach me? Is like, where do I buy the materials? It's like, what do I need? Should it be oils? Should it be acrylic? Should it be oils? Should it be watercolor? Should it be this? Should it be that? This is my mutable chart playing out. A fixed person would have gone in and said, like, I'll buy those 3 colors and that's it.
Right. Yeah, I only need 3.
So this person's like, she's giving me everything I need. It's in the post, and I've wanted to paint. I mean, that's been on the back burner for probably about 7 years now. And as you said, it goes back to like, who am I now?
I love that, because that's something I encourage moms to do, is to try new things, because you don't know until you try.
Yeah.
This may have sounded interesting in the past, but I haven't tried it. Maybe I really don't like it. Or how many moms do you know who had a hobby before their kids and they had to put it aside?
Yes.
And now that their kids have moved out, they have time to pick it up and wait, do I even like that anymore?
Or how many how many women run their businesses as a hobby and then think it can still only be a hobby? And like the first type of person that comes to mind is people that make jewelry. And I mean, here, I mean, I used to do a lot of fairs when I was a photographer, and some of them would be craft and art fairs, some of them would be just art fairs, and you just learned so much from watching how other people interacted with clients, and it was fabulous. And I just couldn't help noting that, like, a lot of the jewelers, like, it was the hobby, and they were charging as little as like €5 for their pieces. That's not my business. I mean, if they're happy, that's fine, but they could have been charging 20 and make it a business. But maybe women like that will do, later on. I don't know. It's hard to know. But as you said, like so many women, they run what could be a business as a hobby because they really only have the time to run it as a hobby.
Yeah, as a mom, you don't have time to develop it.
No.
Maybe that's all they want. It's all good. It's all,
It is. Yeah.
But what is it that works for you right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the lesson, is like, it's all good. It's all learning. I mean, when we first connected, I mean, I think I was living on the Cape and then I moved to the West Coast. And I didn't really know I was coming back to Ireland. I kind of knew I was, but I didn't want to come back. And I was just dreading coming back because, Dublin isn't good for me astrologically. It really isn't. And then, as you know, Dublin wasn't good for me when I came back. And Cork was reasonably good for me as a photographer, but Kenmare is actually much better. And it's only like, 2 mountains over. Like Cork is kind of like over there, but like here is like, which is only 20 miles in, because the Cork border is actually just up the mountain. I can see it looking out the window here. The Caha Pass divides Cork and Kerry, and I'm probably about 5-mile drive from it, but I can actually see the pass looking out the window here. So astrologically, it's been really interesting that Kerry has been so much more abundant for me and given me so many more opportunities during the pandemic. And I would hope that some of the women listening take inspiration from that, despite the times we're going through, it can be a time of maybe finding yourself like never before.
And sometimes it's just that little shift. Maybe you're moving from one county to another. It's just a little shift that makes everything different.
Transformed everything. Transformed everything. And interestingly enough, I did work in Kerry a few years ago, and I kind of like came back to West Cork within a couple of weeks because I just missed it so much, which is interesting. I did work in Sneem for a couple of weeks as a not very good waiting supervisor, I think. It was terrible. And I'd probably outgrown that job long ago, and I just hadn't realized it, because the universe, as I said, like, it's like going back to the Uranus opposition. If you're not on your authentic path, Uranus just come along and just like, okay, no, that's where you're supposed to be going. And it's like, you lose your job or something happens, or else it's where you become more empowered to follow your authentic path. It's like my astrologer has been telling me since he first worked with me that I should be self-employed and working for myself. And it took me 8 years to find the courage to be fully self-employed, and I haven't fired myself. It's like, how many jobs do you need to be let go from or fired from, or whatever reason they give? It's like, before you learn the lesson.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Martha, this has been so much fun. We'll have to do this again sometime.
I'd love to. I'd love to. So does this get posted on your page and then I share it, is it?
It's live on my page right now, and as soon as it probably has to process, and as soon as it does, you can share it.
That's brilliant. That's great. Okay.
All right. Well,
and it's your
pleasure
behind me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Stay on with me for just a moment, but I'm going to.
Yeah, sure.
If I can figure out the technology. Like I said, it's the first time doing this.
Thank you very much for letting me be the guinea pig, because if I tried to do it from my Zoom, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, but I do want to thank everyone who's watched or watched the recording. Thanks for joining us. And tonight is the ending of the signups, the registration for Who Am I Now. We start, I'm sorry, not tonight, tomorrow. Today's Thursday. So on the 11th is the ending of the registration, and we start on Saturday. So join up. It's only 4 weeks, and it's such a gift to get to know yourself. So I will see you in the program, and thanks for joining.